Well, greeting everybody and welcome to the 8th week of our course where we're in module 2.4, Thinking Out Loud, and we're looking at comic art. Technically this would be the midterm, but it's the middle of the term, so don't panic, just buy a comic book. So in the comic art section, we have a lecture that still needs to be illustrated, or it won't be as fun to watch. But we're looking at graphic novels and comic art and how they can be used to envision sustainability better. And I don't know if you ever read any of the great comics that were either utopian or dystopian, apocalyptic. I remember as a kid, my favorite comic of the day when I was really young was Kamandi by Joe Kirby. And that was this guy here, the last man on Earth, the last boy on Earth. So many great, interesting stories, very imaginative. It was kind of like a take on the Planet of the Apes back then. So the sheer imagination about the different things that would happen after the apocalypse. And it starts, of course, with the Statue of Liberty and the Empire State Building, just like in Planet of the Apes. But it has so many other imaginative things that Jack Kirby came up with. So that was my big introduction to apocalyptic envisioning of the Earth AD. The world of Kamandi, after a great natural disaster, has changed the course of all previous history. And it started out with a map, and that was really cool to me. And then you sort of followed the comics through the various areas of the map that had been here inundated by global warming and fragmented and broken apart, and taught me a lot. So making comic books, that's really a lot about what this is about here in this module, and using them to express stuff. And Blender does allow you to make comic books pretty nicely. But there's another program that we're going to use as well, which is called Comic Life, version 3. And Comic Life, I just want to introduce you to, is a very simple way to create an effective comic book. You can get it by going to Plask, P-L-A-S-K. How did this suddenly run into German here? It shouldn't have. Plask.com. And then Comic Life 3 is out there. You can try it or you can buy it. If you buy it, it's $29. So it's really worth having, but you can try it for sure. And I highly recommend it because when you have it, it's great for using for education. Comic Life in your curriculum. Comic Life goes to school. So many ways of bringing subjects to life through making comic books. And it makes it really easy. As you can see here, it gives you a whole bunch of templates. And then if you have this one here, horror story, pick that one. Then you build your comic by going through the template. Harrowing horror, tales of horror. Prepare to wrap yourself in a blanket while you read. Really scary, but you can change all these things. Harrowing tales of sustainability. And of course, you got to make it small enough to fit. Whoops, I didn't do a good job with that, did I? It makes noises when you work with it, which is fun. Sound effect. Maybe harrowing shouldn't be harrowing, it should be inspiring. Tales of sustainability. All right. And then you can put your people's names in there. And so when you want to put in an image, you go and you, I recall right, you insert. Do you insert or do you? The image, oh, I'm sorry, down here on the right, there's albums that it'll find on your computer. and then you look through those albums. Just give it a sec to reload. What happened to my albums? There they are. So you'd find whatever pictures you have handy, and maybe I'd take this one of my wife and I in Palestine building biodigesters and then put that there. So you can size everything down in that you like to do, featuring the Culhane family, right? And then featuring, do we have any other albums in here? So what it seems to look for is it'll look for photos in the pictures folder, but you can also use the Explorer, and then you can find pictures anywhere that you like. So you don't have to be limited by that. All right. So it doesn't look like I have anything in there. And then you can take a picture with the camera as well. It should work. It's not working. Why isn't it working? It's not working. Come on. Well, maybe there's a setup that I haven't done, because you should be able to do that, put it in. But that's besides the point. It does let you do it if you set it up right. I'm using the camera for, because I'm using the camera to make this video. That's why it won't use the camera. Durr. So you do that, and then you can bring in artwork and pictures into the main frame. Just if this thing would just cooperate, that would be lovely. So in our case, if we were talking about this diffusion of innovation thing, we could stretch that. We can't seem to change the aspect ratio. It doesn't really allow that. But it does, you know, it just shows you the number of degrees too. So have a gander at that. Try to get it to precisely be 0 degrees. I don't know if there's any properties in here. Now, and then you have these other templates that you can use. So you can then populate these things. So if you're looking for a bunch of cool templates to bring into your comic, you can make the comic here, of course, and use pictures. There's a sort of stylistic thing there. But use pictures and say whatever you want about them. You know, the ancient art of tiling lends itself to the modern use of recycled HDPE and LDPE plastic very nicely. All right, and so you can work on making comics using this, and then you can export it as a comic book. So that's one thing I wanted to show you. So there's export, and you can export the images or export the frames. But you can also, let me get rid of this thing here. If I want to use just this type of a template, which is similar to my Spider-Man one, then I can export just this frame from number 2 to number 2 and say next and do it as an image. Say next, and let's put it in and say 3-panel comic frame. So you've got all these different comic frames that you can use. Okay. and it will export that comic no matter what you have in it, because then you can come into Blender and go into a new 2D animation, and in here you can create a new collection and call this collection comic templates, and then in this collection you can then go to object mode and add an image for reference or for background. Or you can do an empty image. Let's try this time a background image and find our comic, which was in 3-panel comic frame. It did both of them. Let's do that one there. So now in Blender I have something that I can begin to work on. I call this 3-panel comic background, and having that, when I go to this collection to do the stroke, and let me switch over to my text, I can begin to draw in here. And what do I have? I've got lines. What do I have for material for those lines? I'm using black ink. I think most people say, well, do your roughs in blue and then do another layer to do over them. This does have a fill, by the way. And if you make the fill, let's make the fill green and see what happens. And if you draw, I need to be in draw mode. Let's see if see, so it'll fill it in as you're drawing. So, what? Makes for some cool effects, but it does let you draw some stuff in there. Now, once again, if you want to erase, you hit the Control key and it will erase what you've done with the grease pencil. And so maybe you don't want to have a fill. So sploosh would be what? It would be something diving into the water. So if I make a little head here with arms going down like this, and a body, and legs sort of kicking up there. So somebody diving. And they hit the water. And they go sploosh. And little droplets fly. And then in my next thing, I might have the water here. And I might have the person's head emerging from the water. And they say, as they tread water, they're going to say, come on in, the water's fine, right? And the ripples like this. And then we need a cartoon balloon. And that's where a fill is kind of cool. Because if I come in here and I change, oh, gee, did it really want to do that? It does it for everything unless I start a new grease pencil. Interesting. Well, I guess I can't do a fill there unless I want to make a new grease pencil, which I can. So I could go back to object mode and add a grease pencil, which would be blank, and call this grease pencil cartoon balloons. And for that one, I would create a new material where the outline color is black, but the inside color is decidedly white. And do fill, and I should now be able to come in here and make a, if I go to draw, I should be able to draw a balloon. Yeah, it has white. Now you're thinking, well, that didn't show anything interesting. Let me prove to you, there you go, that it does a fill. So you can start making cool dialogue balloons so that people can talk. Right? So then when you want to come in there and have a character say something, you're going to do another layer. And for this layer, you're going to then come in and get out of draw, but you're going to add a text layer like so, and add text. There should be a text layer in here. There's a text layer there. And find that text layer, which usually ends up down like this. So text layer comes in flat on the XY axis, so you'll have to rotate it in X by 90 degrees, and then you're going to have to shrink it down and move it to where you want it to be. It's okay that it's not on the same plane. In fact, it's almost preferable because you're actually working in the camera picture. So you can take that and shrink it down and move it in, and then you can go to edit for this and then say, hey, the water's warm. And that's an object now. So when you go back into object mode, you can just select that object and move it around. And as an object, you can scale it, and you can do things with it, like come into this and create a material for it with different base color, like maybe you want to have a very dark blue for that. And then you have it right there. Hey, the water's warm. Now, it doesn't have that comic-y font that Comic Life has. There are fonts, however, in this. You go to font, and it will, it should have, in your text, it should have a font. There it is, font. And so you need to pick a font for it to use because it only comes in with that one font. But if you have fonts, you can pull them in. Let me show you what I mean. The first thing is that when you click on this open font, it'll bring up all your Windows fonts. And there are some cool fonts in there, but none of them are comic book fonts. But if I pick this one, then, you know, it's there. It's not a great font. You'd have to change things about it to make it, like change its size perhaps, or change its sheer. Hey, the water's warm, right? You have things you can do with the font. Lot of stuff that you can do. Underline thickness, underline position, small cap scale. There's a lot you can do. But the nice thing is you can keep experimenting with different fonts and see what works for you. Like this one here would be a cursive font called Brush Script. Whether or not there is a comic font already built in, I do not know. There's a kind of Alice in Wonderland one font there. But you can make that. If you don't have a comic font, you should be able to find a comic font somewhere that can be used. Like this one here is a kind of comic-y font, but not perfect. You can go online. So if you go to defont.com, they have a supplementary comic font that you can try out. This is for comic books. See what it looks like. Yeah, that's kind of the comic font type thing that they have, and then you can download that font, and then you have to put that in your Windows folder. So you should extract it. And then once you have the folder, see what's in there. There's the TTF. So I'm going to copy that. So to install a font, you got to go to the Windows Control Panel and then go to Appearance and Personalization, and then go to Fonts, Preview, Delete, Show or Hide Fonts, Change Font Setting. Let's see if we open up the fonts, and then we simply are supposed to be able to drag that font in. So let's see if that turns out to be true. There's the font over there, and if I drag this TFF in here, it looks like it's installing. Yep. So it should be, there's Comic Sans MS. And what was this called? This one that I just put in was called Supplementary, so it should show up down there. Supplementary, there it is, Comic and Regular. So I should have two, one that came with Windows and one that didn't. So let's see, if I click on this object, and now I go to Font, and I go to, can I search? Yes, I can. I go Comic, and the machine freezes. There it goes. There's a comic, there's a couple comics, but there's also the supplementary one that I just installed. So let's see what sup does. Come on, you can do this. Not showing up. One could scroll through. I thought if I hit S, I guess it gets all the S's, but then it sort of freezes there. So I guess maybe it's better just to scroll all the way down. Depends on your system, right? How fast it is. We're in the P's, R, S, and sitcall source, sources, ST. Oh, did it not work? Source. And what was it called again? It was called sup, supplementary, and it's not showing up. That's fascinating. Windows and fonts, and I could have sworn. Ah, that's appearance and personalization, but it needs Windows and fonts. Font settings. Well, that's supposed to be one way that you can put fonts in. The Windows fonts folder, if I look at here and go to here in Windows and then come to fonts. Do we have fonts? Yes, fonts. And let's see if supplementary is in there. There it is, supplementary. So it should have showed up. Maybe they just have to start the program in order to find it. That's entirely possible. So let me try that. Let me save this. Save this as Comic Life. And then close it. And let me open it again. This time, let's see, sup, nothing happens. It don't like it. Well, there is a comic font. There's this one. And while it ain't perfect, it's not quite the same as that one. Oh, one of the reasons is too, this would have to be all in caps, because that's one of the issues with these fonts. So hit Tab and then come back in and write everything in caps to get that. Hey, of water is actually warm. Yeah, not too bad. A bit thin. But the thinness is something that you fill in with the size going up. And if you make it bold, and I guess, how do you make it bold? Well, I have to say, I don't know. I don't know what that does yet. But it is bold if I knew how to make it bold. And I don't yet. Anyway, the point is that you can then copy these and come over here and you can edit that as you like. So you can say, wish block. Wish I had my scuba mask. And so you put that in there, and then you can come in, go back to your stroke there, and get to your tablet, and then come in and go to draw mode, which of course you have to do. There we go. So now he's all sad because he doesn't have his goggles. Anyway, very basic idea for making a comic book in Blunder there. So I would suggest that you can go and get Comic Life, find an unlimited number of different templates that you could use. And when you have those templates, do as much work as you want in Comic Life. But if you then want to be able to do more with it, then bring those templates into Blender. So for example, this one here, I start to make a collection that I can go to whenever I want to. So if I export this one here, and I can do the first one as well, why not? Change the images and then say OK. And then 3-petal comic. I actually should have made this a new folder called Comic Templates. And then I can call this horror comic templates. So you work within these. So under comic templates in that scene, I can always come back and add more of these background images. Comic templates. This should have actually sat in here, but it didn't. So there's those two. And I can bring that one in. And it comes in, as you can see, over here. And then I can bring it down and position it at the same way. And when I'm working, I can turn it on and off. So this came in, this is, let me make sure I turn off the other one. That was 3-panel. This is a 4-panel. Comic background. And by turning these on and off, I can decide how I'd like to work with them and having these elements. So that's it for now. That's the basic idea between using both Comic Life and using Blender together. I guess the last thing that one can say is, for those who are not artists, just as Comic Life lets you put in images, you can always work with images here as well. So if I go to an image of, let's just say, scuba diver at surface. All right, and take the image that you want, and let's say that it's, let's use this one here. All right, save image as, and let's put it in our comic templates. Let's call this folder images for Blender comics, and throw a couple of images in there. This is the same person, so we can certainly use that for scuba skills, right? And it looks like this website has these people doing various things. So just grab pictures that you think would be great for putting in your comic to illustrate it, and then you can come into Blender and you can add an image or an empty, and I do an empty image. That is going to come in flat, which is not what you want. So once again, you're going to have to rotate it in the X by 90, and then it's fine. Bring it with G in Y a bit forward so you can look at it. And then there's, in that empty, you can pick the image that you want, which in our case would be images for Blender comics, and pick the image that you want and use that image by scaling it to be in your comic, right? And you have then the ability to use that. You can scale it in Z, for example. You can fill up the whole frame, just like you would do in Comic Life, except here it doesn't snap into the frame like it does in Comic Life. So you have less ease of doing this, but it will do all that. And then, of course, you can add your cartoon balloons. And there was a cartoon balloon there. It only doesn't show up because we've put this in front of things. So keep in mind the placement of stuff. So if we bring it right behind, then we have our cartoon balloon, and we can move the cartoon balloon up, except that they're all the same object. So in that case, you'll need to go to, not Alt-P, it's not clear parent, you'll need to go to edit mode and then select this one and make its own separate object. Not separate strokes, but we take this and we say separate strokes, selected point, selected strokes. That should have made this its own object. Yep, it did. Okay. See that little dot there? That is that idea of the origin not being in the geometry. So now the origin's in the geometry, and I have this. If I want to edit this, I can come now into this and zoom in on it, and I can stretch that part down like so. And then once again, you can grab a piece of text and duplicate that text, and then you can change this as you like. And she could be saying, "Hey, Tom, I have an I have an extra mask here," right? So it has a happy ending, a happy resolution. Now, then you say, well, wait a minute, I'm doing a comic book. I don't necessarily want to have photographs in my comic book. Well, then you can do the rotoscoping thing. You can come in here and you can change the alpha. Click on Use Alpha. I've got to be on this. Empty. This is the scuba diver picture 1. And I can change the alpha here so that it's sort of transparent, and I can eventually get rid of it. So when I have that, then I can come in, because I say, well, I'm not a very creative artist. I don't know how to draw. You don't have to draw. You can come in here and get to your grease pencil, which was cartoon balloons, which is the stroke here, and click off of it, and then come in here and say, all right, I'm going to go to draw, if I can get to it. Hold on, I need to get to the stroke. I need to go to draw. Right, and then you can come in and you can say, all right, I'm going to draw a face here with some hair. And I really stretched her face out, didn't I? So she really looks bizarre. But there's nothing to keep you from sort of etch-a-sketching this thing. This is the snorkel, and this is the regulator down here. And yeah, I mean, you can spend all the time in the world that you want to, if you really want to. She sort of gets all flaky there with her arm. But all that is underwater, so you can show your water behind her like that. The point being that when you go to the scuba diver picture, you can actually turn it off, and now you have that part of the frame there. So you have the ability to bring in pictures, to use pictures, all the same stuff that you were able to do in Comic Life, but you can do it in Blender and make your comic books in here. And there's one last thing we should look at. So the last thing I'll say here is that when you're we're here, this picture here, you can manipulate if you go to what's known as compositing and hit use nodes, and you can then, you'll have an input node, which will be an image, and that image that you're using would be the image of the scuba diver, and then you would add a output node, which is the viewer, and for the viewer, if you were to join the image here to the image there, and then you could click on backdrop, then you have the picture, and then you can start to make this into a cartoon picture by adding another node, which might be, say, a color node, where you change the color correction. And with that, if you zoom in a bit here and move these down, you can change the saturation, you can up the contrast, change the gamma. So you can make a basically what looks like a comic book image out of the other image that you have. I'm using black and white here, but it doesn't have to be black and white. So you can see there's stuff that you can add in the with these converters, and eventually there's filters that you can air. Like, I don't know how in paint might work, but you have to sort of play around with these because there's ways that you can mess with those. We'll get back to you on that.